Thomas Dolby has enjoyed a varied career that has spanned over 40 years. During the synth-pop movement of the 1980s, he was one of the most recognizable figures. He played the synthesizer for artists like Foreigner and Def Leppard. He also produced and wrote songs for several artists, including Houdini's Magic Wand, which became the first platinum-selling rap single. Much of his synth playing and production work earned him 5 Grammy nominations. Dolby was also one of the first artists to use synthesizers and samplers to make music. One song in particular became a top 5 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. The song was She Blinded Me with Science. Maybe you've heard of it.
Science!
Dolby was a major collaborator, working with artists like Herbie Hancock, Howard Jones, Stevie Wonder, George Clinton, David Bowie, and countless others. He cited Joni Mitchell as one of his early heroes growing up, and then ended up producing one of her albums, Dog Eat Dog. Beginning in the mid-80s and throughout the 90s, Dolby was writing film scores and working with George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Ken Russell. He was building his own computer equipment, founded the software company Headspace in the 90s, and created the Beatnik audio engine, which is an early software synthesizer that was designed for video games. But ultimately, this technology was used in the ringtones of more than half of the world's mobile phones by 2005. His career took yet another turn when he became the music director for the TED conferences and toured the US, performing a live soundtrack to his documentary, The Invisible Lighthouse, which he shot, scored, and edited himself. And Dolby is also the author of his first book, The Speed of Sound, published in 2016. Now in his early 60s, Thomas Dolby is a music professor at the Peabody Conservatory of the Johns Hopkins University, where he heads the new undergraduate degree program, Music for New Media, which explores film scoring, video game music, and composing for virtual reality platforms. Hey guys, my name is Anthony, and I study music. I often wonder what makes a successful artist, and we've all heard of the trope, the starving artist, and nobody wants to be one. And the answer to this is actually not so black and white, and I think the best way to find out is to ask an artist who has made it. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do just that with a very seasoned artist by the name of Thomas Dolby. In your opinion, what is the most important innate attribute that you believe every artist needs in order to find success? So this should be something that comes natural to someone, like what quality?
There's two pieces to this answer, really. The first is an internal one. If you were a hermit living in a cave, what would make you a creative person? And the second is, in the real world, what's going to enable you to express yourself in front of an audience of some sort, because there's great art, and then there's art that reaches people and makes an impact, and they don't always intersect, but ideally most of us dream that we'll do both. We'll make great art or music, and we'll reach a wide audience and have a profound impact on them. I think that, to answer the first part, people have different degrees of gift, a sort of natural gift for what they do and for expressing themselves, and for having an active imagination, and working on the skills and the craft required to turn what's in your imagination into something tangible. Most of us are born with some degree of a creative gift, which can be refined and built on, and you can add the craft to that sort of natural skill, and that you can do in isolation. Some people have the ability to develop their gift without any outside help, but for most of us it's also important to be a great listener or a great watcher of what's going on culturally all around you, the history of the field in which you're working and the way that it's evolved, to be a keen observer of all of that and to learn from it, and to be a part of the human race. I mean, artists have a way of holding up a mirror to society, so a great piece of art is one that is timely, that in a way makes real something that we've all been feeling. So, I'll give you an example. I saw a Banksy painting the other day called Show Me the Monet. And he'd basically taken Monet's water lilies, the water lily garden. And it's a scene of the bridge there in the water lily garden with like an old traffic cone and a shopping cart half submerged in the pond. And that's it. And it's called Show Me the Monet. And the moment you see it, you totally get it. And he doesn't need to justify it with a lot of words. And it just does what it does. So he's a member of the human race, and he sees what's going on around him, and he's able to be an artist in the context of what's going on with a suitable amount of respect and disrespect for history and those that have come before him. So, you can be a hermit on the one hand and develop your skills, but on the other hand, you're not a hermit in reality as an artist. You are a member of the human race. You have to know your place, in society. So those things are very important. Part two of the answer is more of a career, from a career point of view. As somebody pursuing a career in your chosen field, you have to sort of learn the rules of the game, and you have to be willing to play the game to an extent. And that means making some sacrifices and cutting some corners in order to give yourself a platform from which you can show off your great art to the world and hopefully gain an audience and make an impact.
I really like what you said, that there is a sort of an element of you're born with something, but then there's also a lot that can be learned out in the field per se, and a lot of observation of just humanity, and taking note of, all right, this is real life. You have to do this way. You may not want to, but you have to, and that's what's important for success. So that's actually a really good segue into the next point I wanted to ask about, was sort of what's the most important skill that you believe every young artist should develop in order to find success. So this is something that, is developed over time and like observed, and like maybe you don't have it right away, but something that can be taught.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a very old trope, necessity is the mother of invention. And one of the challenges, I think, for young artists today is that in terms of necessity, we have almost everything we need at our fingertips. So the moment you hit any kind of a challenge, a problem that needs a solution, you're a few key presses away from a solution of sorts, right? Because you Google it, you find a clip on YouTube of somebody else that solved the same problem. Worst comes to worst, you look up the user manual, you post a message on a forum, and by morning you've got half a dozen answers from people that have dealt with this problem before. So, in your generation, you've grown up knowing that most problems have a very simple solution the moment you throw it out there and you ask the world. That in itself is a problem, because in my experience, I feel that in my career, all the best stuff that I've done has been because I hit a problem that seemed insurmountable. I couldn't see a way around, to navigate around this roadblock. And I had to use my ingenuity and the limited resources at my disposal to come up with a creative solution for it. So, as a case in point, the first musical demos I ever made in a bedsitter in South London, I had a 2-track Revox tape recorder and a monophonic synthesizer. And I used to make my drum tracks by programming a snare drum, and I would run a metronome, and then with one finger, for 5 minutes, I go, and then I would rewind the tape after 5 minutes of that, and I would program a bass drum sound, because there's no user memories, of course, on the synth. And then I would bounce the left track of the Revox over to the right track while adding the bass drum sound. So now I would sit there going boom, boom, boom for 5 minutes, and that would be my drum track. So one night I was out in a nightclub, and it was early in the evening, and the dance floor was empty. And I was sitting there looking at the dance floor, and there were red and green lights flashing in time to the music. And I thought, I wonder how they do that. And I went over to the lighting, to the disco DJ booth, and I talked to the DJ, and it turned out he had this sort of sound to light unit, which was basically converting voltages from the music and flashing these lights. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could use that same unit to play my drums for me, so I wouldn't have to sit there, using my finger. And the long and the short of it is that if you listen to the drum part on She Blinded Me with Science, it's actually a set of Simmons electronic drums being triggered by a disco lighting console. I bought a unit called a PPG 340-380 wave computer from Germany, which had been designed to turn Tangerine Dream's light show on and off. And using a soldering iron, I basically hooked it up to the Simmons pads and had this lighting unit play my Simmons drums for me. But it has a very unique sound to it, right? And it turned out to be a top 5 hit. So, I really put that down to the fact that, I had a problem, I had an obstacle I had to get around, and I had to come up with a creative solution to it that involved technology, that involved my musical intuition. And it gave me something really individual that was an expression of myself. And it helped me, sell the record. And so I think, if I look through my career, the different stages of it, there were MTV videos, there was, the internet came along, there was doing sound on the internet, mobile phones came along, and DIY filmmaking, and now teaching at Peabody, and in each case, I had a problem I was facing that didn't have an easy solution. And by applying my brain and my imagination, my intuition to solving that problem, I came up with a creative solution that was unique and which appealed to people. And I think that's really crucial. So a roundabout way of saying that if you're a young artist today, you should sometimes resist the easy way out of just sort of Googling the solution to your problem. And you should say, well, what have I got around me here? I've got an old webcam. I've got a half broken iPad where the screen doesn't work. I've got a monophonic synth, which is running out of juice. And I've got this green blanket I'm going to put behind me. How can I figure out how to solve this problem to in a sort of MacGyver-like fashion? I don't know if you remember the MacGyver TV series, but he's always locked in a room somewhere and he's got like a ball of string and an old, pot of glue or something like that. So, if you follow those kind of paths, you're going to come up with something unique and different. And it could easily be the key to your success, because you're not like the 10,000 other guys out there that all went down the same rabbit hole, trying to solve this problem.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's sort of a mixture of your own creativity, your adaptability, and your innovation, and using those traits in ways that other people may not. If you could choose up to 3 key moments over the course of your career that you believe was significant to your career trajectory, what would they be?
I think I'll try and pick a couple of successes and a failure. Because I think that, failure is really important. It hurts a lot at the time, but in a lot of ways you learn more from failure than you do from success. Because if you have a success, you crack the champagne, you invite your friends over, everybody celebrates, and you assume that it was your brilliance that made you successful. When you fail, you are forced to take a long look at yourself and figure out what went wrong, what could or should have happened, what could you have done differently? And you sort of make a resolution that in the future, you're not going to make that same mistake again. So failure is a lot more pivotal often to your career than success. As far as successes, I'd say that the first really was that, I was very lucky to have a reputation in the music business in the early 80s through my keyboard playing and production for other artists, people like Foreigner, Def Leppard, Lena Lovitch, Bruce Woolley, and so on. So I'd been involved in hit records as a side player, as a keyboard player, and as a writer and producer. I had a reputation. I was lucky enough to get a record deal with a major record company. I made an album, which I thought was a great album. Got great reviews, won a couple of awards, and sold about 3 copies. None of which were in the USA. And the key at the time to success in the USA, which is the biggest, music market in the world, was radio play. If you couldn't get your record on the radio, then forget about it. You weren't going to make it into the charts. You weren't going to sell any records. But along came something which changed the game slightly, and that was MTV. And I saw the first couple of videos on MTV, things like Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. These were not songs that were getting played on American radio, but MTV was so popular and so influential in the first, year or so that it went into major American cities, that if you had a successful video on MTV, radio stations would start playing it because people were calling in asking for it. And I thought, wow, okay, if I can make a video that was, that was popular on MTV, maybe I'd start getting some radio play as well. And so I came up with a storyboard for She Blinded Me with Science. And I went to my record company. I said, look, give me 10 grand to make this video, and maybe I can have a hit in America. And fortunately, they believed in me enough to give me that opportunity. And I wrote and directed the video myself. And sure enough, it was successful on MTV, and American radio stations started getting calls from users going, I want to hear that Science song. And so it started getting played on radio stations. And simultaneously, it was a crossover club hit because, the 12-inch of it was worked great in a dance format. So suddenly I'd achieved what I needed all along, which was American radio play. And I had a successful record. So, that was a pivotal moment really in my career. I never set out to be like a top 10 artist. A lot of the artists that I admired, I have no idea where they got to in the charts or how many gold records they had. People like Captain Beefheart and Frank Zappa and Joni Mitchell and Van Morrison. To me, the fewer people knew about them, the better. They were cool because they were like not in the charts. So it wasn't an ambition of mine to be a commercial artist, but I have to admit that once I had commercial success, all of those artistic avenues opened up for me, on the back of that success. So I was very grateful for that. But it was never a priority to have like a string of, pop chart hits after that. I wanted instead to like get to work with some of my heroes and make the albums I really wanted to make and be a free artist. And, the success of that record really enabled that for me as a springboard. So that would be the first moment. The next moment I think that I would mention was a sort of a lifelong ambition of mine. Like I'm sure, like yourself and many other people, in a way, your teenage years are when you were most influenced by your heroes. And everybody's got their heroes. I grew up with David Bowie, was like a huge influencer for my generation in England in the 70s and early 80s. And one of the proudest moments of my life was when I got a call from Mr. Bowie saying, in just over a week's time, there's going to be a big charity concert in London called Live Aid. And it's going to be a big deal. And my band are busy. Could you help me put together a band in a hurry and rehearse some songs to do a live set at Wembley for Live Aid? And so I put the band together, and we had 3 nights of rehearsal with David Bowie, and all of us were completely starstruck. And he was wonderful to work with. He was like a absolute ray of light. And in July of 1985, I flew with David Bowie in a helicopter into Wembley Stadium right before our set. And the band on before us were Queen. And if you've seen the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, and you've seen the shot where the camera flies into Wembley Stadium and there's Freddie Mercury on stage, that was basically my view from the helicopter with Bowie. And Bowie was freaking out because he hates flying. So he was, for that 10 minutes we were in the air, he was an absolute like diva. But as soon as we landed, he went back to being sweet again and 10 minutes later, we were on stage and I was playing the honky tonk piano intro to his song TVC 15. And we played 4 songs that we barely knew. We'd never rehearsed them. We never played them back to back, but we'd all grown up with them. And it finished up with his song Heroes, which is a very easy one to screw up. It's not complicated, but sometimes the simple songs are the easiest ones to mess up when you don't know them. And I just let my fingers do the walking. And I was like a teenage fanboy again, sitting, 6 feet behind Mr. Bowie and a whole stadium full of screaming fans. And it was being broadcast live to like 1.5 billion people around the world. So that was, probably the proudest moment of my career right there. And then lastly, just to finish this up, the third pivotal moment was a failure. So another one of my childhood and teen heroes that I mentioned was Joni Mitchell. She was really the godmother of like every female singer-songwriter that's come since. You could name a dozen of them that were influenced by Joni. She wrote her own lyrics and songs and played guitar and piano in a really interesting way and was involved in her own production. And she was an absolute uncompromising, no frills artist. And she was somebody else that I'd really adored all of my life. And I was lucky enough to be invited by her to co-produce an album with her called Dog Eat Dog. And it was a catastrophe. I think all the reasons that I loved Joni sort of backfired because she didn't really want somebody sort of moving in on her production. She described it later in Rolling Stone as he thought he was an interior designer, but he interior designed me out of my own house. And it ended up in tears because a series of bad things happened and we had a horrible row that I never really recovered from. And during that row, she called me every horrible name under the sun and belittled me as an artist. And it was like, thum, I was stabbed in the heart to be, have a bad experience with one of my heroes. And I've never really recovered to this day. It's a scar that has never healed. And like I was saying, I think I learned more from the failure and the disappointment of that. And I took a long look at myself and, I realized something about collaboration from that. And that is that, you can't impose when you're collaborating on somebody else's record, you can't impose yourself on them. You have to be, you can be an interpreter of their ideas. You can help them channel their ideas, help them focus their ideas, hold a mirror up to their ideas. But you can't go in with your own agenda. It was always going to be Joni's name on the front of the album. I would be in the small print on the back. And my job as a producer was to take a back seat and help Joni make the album that she needed to make. And it took me too long to recognize that. And in many ways, I deserved the treatment that I got. It was a bit harsh, I have to say. But I think I learned more from that experience than probably I did from, playing with Bowie at Live Aid.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. But I gotta say, it's really great that you were able to learn from experiences. I mean, not everyone can learn from their mistakes and sort of turn that into something good. Use that to help them in the future. And it seems like you're very good at that. I mean, it's really cool that you can see that as I guess an opportunity to learn something to help you in the future.
You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable like that.
Yeah.
You have to open yourself up to that. A lot of people put on this armor, about their art, their music, their business, their brand. And the moment they feel under attack, the armor goes up, the shield goes up, and they do whatever it takes to deflect it, even if that means being aggressive and nasty and unpleasant. And you can't be like that as an artist. You have to be vulnerable. And at the end of the day, people will respect you more if they see that you're willing to be vulnerable and take it on board and learn from it. And that's very hard to do, especially when it's somebody that is inferior to you artistically. That's very hard. But when you're trying to make it in the business and you're trying to make a name for yourself, you have to really take your lumps, and you have to leave your ego at the door and realize, okay, this is a learning experience. This hurts, but this is a way for me to learn and improve and make myself stronger.
Yeah. Well said. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. That was Thomas Dolby, and he was actually my teacher for a year, and I learned a great deal from him, partly because he's had so many careers throughout his life, so he has a lot to share, and now he shares his knowledge with music students as well as Baltimore youth. It was a lot of fun doing this project, and I really hope you were able to gain something from this. Peace out.